call this meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council Township of North Huron accept the agenda for the September 8th, 2020 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin, seconder. I have Anita. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. I myself am going to declare one tonight on 7.8.1. These are relatives of mine. Not seeing any other, we'll move on. Public comments. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to speak to the item of business on the agenda for 2 minutes in person. Is there anybody that would like to speak tonight? Not seeing any, we shall move on. Consent agenda that the Council Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent agenda items 5.1.1 to 5.1.3. And further, the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives consent agenda 5.1.4 to 5.3.3 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Rick, seconded by Paul. Would anybody like to talk about anything on the agenda? Trevor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. My question is for Jamie, the Director of Public Works. I just want an update on, I see Carling Terrace is got the paving complete, but I'm not seeing any construction or of the crosswalk across Carling Terrace at Corin, where it goes to Sacred Heart. Just an update on that. Is that I'm assuming it's still in process. I just haven't seen anything on that.
Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. Through Chair Bailey to Councillor Seat, Deputy Seat. I believe that is coming. I know that there was still something was coming to get all that put together, so you will see that shortly.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, on 5 through you, Reeve, for 5.3.3, letter from Steve Clark. I have the operating costs there, he's saying, keeping track of that, and the pressure. So I'm just curious, what all would the pressures be, like where the number can't be full in the daycare and things like that? What, could you give me an example? Maybe it's Sue Carson.
Through your worship, Donna would be best to speak to that one.
Donna?
Okay, thank you.
If I may, thank you. So we're fortunate in that we don't have a transit system. A transit system has really taken a big hit for municipalities, so that would be one for sure. And there is supposed to be a separate funding pot come forward for the daycare, so we don't expect, as long as that comes to fruition, then we'll have extra fund, another pot of money to offset things like what you're talking about through daycare revenue losses. So what you're talking about there is for phase 2 funding, which at this point that isn't, you don't have to apply for phase 2 funding until later on in October. Right now what they're wanting, which I've signed this letter, and so the Township of North Huron is going to get the $138,500 to offset the expenses that we have now, and then also to the end of the year. And in addition to that, if we don't spend all of that, then we're mandated to put it into reserves for 2021 to continue to offset COVID expenses.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Reeve. Yeah, it's 532. It's ACW's letter out to everybody basically about the carbon tax exemption for farmers, propane and natural gas. I'm glad they've done this. I just hope everyone's read it and comes to everyone's light that this is important. Most farmers, some supply managed can, but most farmers cannot pass any costs on to anybody, no matter how much they want to. So it's just something you just take in your pocket, and it's hard. And of course, you're talking barns and stuff in the field, and drying grains, dryers. It's stuff that's not on the highways. It's just. I'm just really glad to have read that, and hoping that the Federation of Agricultures and Christian farmers are going government with this same idea. It's worth it. Some of the greenhouses, they do have some exemptions. There are some exemptions out there, so it'd be nice if all farmers could be.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? I'm gonna speak to a couple of them. 5.3.1, the letter from CFA in the Greens property. It's gonna relate directly down to the one that we have out, 5.2.2. So the letter, when this letter was drafted up, the next day I had a call from one of the members telling me what was going on in that, and I said, it's a shame you didn't call me first. It's my understanding the Greens have not asked for a building permit yet, so nobody's holding them up. Greens were never hooked up to the municipal water or sewer, ever, so nobody's holding them up. They are in Morris Turnberry. We're in negotiations with Morris Turnberry. They've walked away from negotiations as explained in 5.2.2. So I think really we should be sending back a letter to the HCFA and explaining to them that really they should understand what we're talking about before they come forward as a group, because again we're not holding anything up. We never have held anything up. Has nothing to do with North Huron. Greens have never been hooked up. Having said that, I will tell you that Councillor Chris Palmer and myself, Reeve Bailey, to my understanding, are the only two councillors on either one of the councils that have reached out to the Greens to have a conversation with them. We are interested in seeing them move forward. We have explained to them that we need to make a deal with Morris Turnberry. Unfortunately, they're caught in the middle of it. If they need to hook up to our systems, but at this point in time, we're not sure on that. So I'd just like to bring that to everybody's attention. Anyone else? Seeing none, we shall move on. Number 6, public meetings, hearings and delegations. Andrew Garland, BM Ross and Association Limited, with the presentation of final water and wastewater management plan. Andrew, go ahead.
Sorry, Reed Bailey, I think
Oh,
we need to vote on that
sorry.
motion.
Sorry, can we go back to the 5.1 to 5.33? Do we have I have a mover and seconder. I forgot to call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Okay. In that case, Andrew, now you're up.
First, or just right into
No, you can go ahead. I'll just introduce Andrew. Andrew is from BM Ross and Associates out of Goderich. Quite some time ago, back in 2017, I believe, we started the water and wastewater master plan. As all of us know, long-term planning and sustainability is our high priority these days and has been. So to continue on to that path, we were successful in obtaining what they call CWWF funding, which is Clean Water and Wastewater funding. So with that, we had embarked on having BM Ross take on the water and wastewater master plan. This plan actually evolved into much more than the normal water and sewer master plans would actually cover. So Andrew's going to talk about that a little bit. But this should be and will be for us, and especially with our new public works director, this will be a long-term document that will give us some advice and budget planning and some long-term strategies in order to move our water and sewer forward, and it will be a great addition to our asset management plan. So there was more to it than just what is involved in a normal water and sewer master plan, and I think you're going to go over the pieces. Are you, Andrew, or did you want me to do that?
Nope, I'm happy to.
Okay, so thank you and welcome, Andrew. This was the big pile of paper that compiled that document, and so then because there was so much reading, that's why we sent it out to you a couple of weeks ago so that you would have had a chance to go through it. So thank you, Andrew, and welcome.
Thank you, Reed Bailey, and members of council for having me tonight, and thanks, Donna, for the introduction. Having done too many of these virtually in recent months, it's kind of nice to be out in person, and I think this is maybe the first day ever my wife's expressed some jealousy that I get to go to a council meeting while she's stuck at home with the kids one more night, so thanks for having me. And that's a great introduction, Donna, so thanks for that. Just going through some some history of the project. As Donna said, this really started back in 2017 with a focus just on the Wingham standpipe, with no issues there. And through the course of some grant money you got and other work, it evolved. And early on in the process, we worked with township staff to identify development commitments that you already had and potential development, incorporate that into the plan. There was physical inspections of your infrastructure, so a big component of the project budget was doing sanitary sewer videos, and you might remember some of those highlights from last year. Also electrical and mechanical inspections at a lot of your facilities, so that was a big part of feeding sort of the asset management and existing infrastructure rating information. Looking at the actual capacities of your system and then evaluating what reserves were available for development. We did a bit of an abbreviated presentation to council way back in July of last year. And then it was September of last year that we had that marathon session with you, going through a lot of the nitty gritty on this process. And that incorporated not just the sort of conventional master plan elements, but also matters related to asset management planning, review of your rates and financial planning as well. And really, as Donna alluded to, that's a lot more effort than a lot of municipalities or townships would conventionally do for a master plan. But ultimately, I think it positions you really well for the future, because knowing what you need for infrastructure is one thing, but then planning how you're going to pay for it and when you're going to need to pay for it. Those things are all related and intertwined, and I'm hoping that it's very valuable for you in the future to have really all that process done at one time. As time goes on, your needs will change. Some things will be replaced, some things will deteriorate, so you'll have to sort of refresh what's considered to be the current state of things as time goes on, but it's, I think, a very good starting point for you. And for the last close to a year, basically, there's been ongoing work reconciling some of your database related to your assets. The legislative scene for asset management planning is changing in the province, and I think we talked about that last year. And so working with Donna, working with Citywide, who does your asset management planning, those records will be reconciled and again puts you in a better position moving forward. And then just formalizing of the report and all of the supporting documents that go with it. There's all kinds of background information as part of this project. The focus for tonight is really talking about infrastructure requirements that have been identified through the process for both your existing populations and also for growth potential. And then hopefully adoption of the master plan document. The way that this works is that once council's satisfied and the master plan document is adopted, a notice of completion will be posted for public and agencies to see. They can review the draft plan, provide comment if they want, and then after 30 days, if there are no significant comments from the public or any agencies, then really the plan is finalized and formalized, and that's your master plan moving forward. Not for tonight, but certainly if you have any questions, let me know, and then Donna and I talked that whether it's tonight or if a return visit's useful for you, happy to do that too. But not for tonight. Some of the broader project elements that we've worked on were again the asset management planning piece, the rate review financial planning pieces that are really done now, but not going to get into those details tonight. Like I said, they're not always done concurrently with a master plan, but in this project you have done it, and I think it gives you a good multifaceted approach for planning in the future. So as part of the plan and looking at your infrastructure needs, the servicing commitments that were considered, obviously existing customers, and then development plans or potential plans that we looked at for Wingham includes the Maitland Estates property, formerly A2A, and maybe even a different name before that. So we considered 454 units to be potential full development there. The Hutton Heights subdivision considered 100 units there. In Blythe, AJ Holdings, I think, is the Rutledge subdivision, 105 units there, and then for each community we also assumed just 25 infill lots. And then, for Wingham, included the cross-border servicing, with Morris Turnberry, a commitment there as well to look at. On the water treatment side of things, for Wingham, what we identified, the firm capacity of your wells, and by firm capacity, we mean if you take the largest supplying well that you have out of service, you know, for maintenance or for an emergency, something like that, what's the firm capacity that you have with that well out of service? That's really a Ministry of Environment guideline way of looking at it. And in Wingham, with your largest well out of service, your firm capacity would still exceed what a maximum day demand would be for the town, for both existing development and your projected requirements. Looking at, so that'd be maximum demand over a 24-hour period. Peak demands, or shorter term, morning peaks when everyone's getting ready for work or coming home after work and making dinner, those shorter term peaks, your firm capacity would not be sufficient to meet both existing and projected commitments. And typically, the way that that kind of issue is dealt with is either supplying peak from storage to augment that supply, or to have more redundant wells. And in your community, the goal would be to do it with storage, and you're already in the midst of planning for replacement of the standpipe that you have here in Wingham. So that would really be the way to address the peak demands in this community. With the standpipe as it is right now, because there's no booster pumping there to utilize the full volume, it's really only about 10% of the total volume, the top several feet, that's really readily usable at an adequate pressure for your community. And to date, that hasn't been an issue, because you have had surplus well capacity, and you haven't had times where you've had, you know, wells down plus peak demands going on, so you've been okay to date. And then just moving forward, because of the need to replace that standpipe anyways due to age and condition, replace it with a suitable volume planning for future needs, and with booster pumping equipment there, and then that would really take care of supply and storage needs for existing and potential development in the community moving forward. On the wastewater treatment side of things, your Wingham wastewater plant's rated on an average day basis over the course of the year, and we don't see anything there to suggest that it wouldn't be adequate for both existing and projected future development, so that's good. Several years ago, we looked at some potential improvements to the facility layout to better manage the sludge that's produced there. So that design exists, and at such a time, if you have desire and budget, you can implement that kind of upgrade there. But that's more of an operation and maintenance kind of thing. It's not really something that's necessary for the successful operation of the plant and to allow development to happen. For the community of Blythe and the water treatment, the firm capacity again of the wells exceeds maximum day demand for existing development, but if you factor in the projected future development at a full scale level, the firm capacity would be exceeded then, and the capacity of the wells, the firm capacity is also insufficient to meet existing peak demands, and so would be also insufficient for future projected peaks. Exact same as Wingham, the risks associated with that, you can mitigate that risk either by having additional standby well capacity, or providing adequate storage, and those are sort of an order of magnitude separate in terms of cost. Providing a standby well is going to be several $100,000, where for storage you're going to be into multiple millions of dollars to do that. So there might be more benefits with storage, but cost is definitely a constraint there as well. Potable water storage in the community currently, the effective storage in the reservoir there would be less than 25% of what the Ministry of Environment would recommend as a value, and by providing additional storage at some point in the future, that can help mitigate the risks associated with insufficient firm capacity, and would also be a source of water during a fire event in the future. So I just suggest that's kind of a longer term project to consider for that community. And with water, that's really the big thing identified for Blythe. For Blythe wastewater, the plant's rated on both an annual average day basis and also a peak daily basis. On that average day basis, the plant, we think, has sufficient capacity both for existing and for future development. On a peak day basis, there's been times that it's been exceeded with the existing development. And really what that means is that you've got times where there's infiltration or inflow getting to the plant that can't be treated. It wouldn't warrant treatment capacity expansion at the plant. The way to handle that would really be to mitigate those peaks, and you can do that by providing equalization storage at the site where space is available. You know, some plants will do that using like a little lagoon cell, almost like a stormwater pond at site. You can build tankage. If it's to be dealt with at the plant, it would require a little bit more assessment, the interplay between the sewage pumping station and the treatment plant, the best way to do that. Again, I don't think that's anything that warrants real immediate panic attention. That's just kind of a long-term planning thing to keep in mind. More than any kind of capacity issue at the plant, equipment upgrades that'll be forthcoming for the plant there would be replacement of the effluent filter, and that's really just an age consideration there, nothing to do with capacity so much. And then right now the plant uses chlorine to disinfect the effluent, and there's federal regulation coming into effect that would require you to basically eliminate chlorine. They give you some small amount of buffer that if you were to say chlorinate and then dechlorinate, within that, most plants we're seeing are just converting to UV disinfection as a way to handle that regulatory change.
Can we ask?
Go ahead, Chris.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
They wanna get rid of the chlorine aspect in waste. How about in the potable?
No, still want it in the
Terrific.
potable to make sure that nothing nasty is coming out of your tap distribution system. So it's just the wastewater effluent.
Go ahead, Paul.
Through you, for the Blythe water treatment, you said additional standby well. Would one be sufficient there?
Yeah, the way you would likely do that, I think, would be at the exact same site where you have your newest well, well 5 right now. You'd really be finding another spot on the same property. The aquifer wouldn't allow you, I don't think, without having studied it, we don't know for sure, but I can't imagine you'd be able to pump from both wells at the same time. But the idea would be you'd probably alternate them back and forth, and then if one's ever offline, you still have firm capacity at that site until you get the change. We looked at the water distribution system, so the water mains, also the wastewater collection, your sewers and your sewage pumping stations. All of that pipe infrastructure, the water main, the sanitary sewers, we really did whatever we could to grade it in terms of performance, capacity, condition for the sewer that we actually got from the camera work. Water mains just from modeling, because there's no practical way to inspect the inside of the pressure pipe. But really took all of that data and also combined it with your road condition study work from a few years prior, and then just really tried to combine it all. Worked pretty extensively with township staff to work on a rating system and really prioritize 20-year capital road reconstruction program. This is one where it's part science and part art, where you're depending on input from operations staff and township staff. And it's my expectation that as time goes on and as some needs change, you'll work on revising that as appropriate. But for now, you have a plan in place for order of sequence, and what you see with Carling Terrace right now is really the first project off of that hit list. So it's trying to really address the road condition, the water main capacity, and sewer condition and capacity all in one as part of that program. For each community specifically, in Wingham for water main, kind of a major project, NF5 will be an extension to service Hutton Heights, and in Blythe there'll be a number of water mains, warranty and replacement to improve fire protection in different locations. Again, like we just as part of a road reconstruction program. On the sanitary sewer side of things, in Wingham, the northwest, what we call the northwest trunk sewer is somewhat of a bottleneck for future development, specifically the Maitland Estates lands. It wouldn't prevent development from initiating there, like probably even several dozen homes is what you could get within that development, and then just, but if that's gonna then grow beyond that, you want to start planning for dealing with that. And I don't think it would have to be all in one shot. It's the kind of thing that you could sort of do block by block and plan for. The Josephine sewage pumping station, your main pumping station here in Wingham, there have been times where it's been pretty close to peak capacity, and really I think the way you deal with that is just when the pumps are due for replacement there. With the force main that was done some years ago, you'd be able to get bigger capacity pumps in there. You just have to pay attention to downstream impacts at the treatment plant when that's done. And then in the community of Blythe, again, the main sewage pumping station, there's times where at peak flow would be near or at capacity, and a similar kind of approach there. You could look at some larger pumps. We just want to pay attention to the treatment plant itself. So that's kind of the highlights of what infrastructure needs were identified, both for existing and for future. And again, if you had a chance to review the plan, the next steps would be that if council accepts it, then we publish the notice of completion, or work with your staff to get that published in some papers and online. And then after that 30-day period, if there's no significant comments, the plan would be finalized. So that's really what I wanted to present in an effort to get that finalized, but certainly happy to take any questions.
Questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, Rick. Going through the report, when you're going on the conditioning of the facilities, found a great deal of repetitive small maintenance issues at almost every plant. Light bulbs, switches that were corroded and stuff like that. Is that common throughout all the ones that you've looked at? That to me makes the maintenance, small maintenance an issue.
Sure, common enough, I would say, and probably because some of those things aren't critical to the successful operation of the plant. The kind of folks that get into review those facilities and make those assessments, they're always paying attention to especially code issues. So if it can become especially apparent where facilities were built 30, 40 years ago, and code requirements may change over time. So they'll tend to flag everything that would need to be done to bring it up to current code requirements. So I don't think you're uncommon in that regard, and really that information is hopefully provided just to help seed sort of annual maintenance programs moving forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Donna, did you have further comments?
No, I didn't, other than to just thank Andrew and his staff for the work on there. We still have next steps after we get the plan approved to get this uploaded into our asset management software and some different things. So this finalizes this piece, and then we continue to finish up to make full use of this document, so.
Thank you, Donna. In that case, that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a presentation regarding the final water and wastewater master plan presented by Andrew Garland at the September 8th, 2020 meeting for information purposes. And further, the council adopts a water and wastewater management master plan for Wingham and Blythe. And further, that the notice of the study completion for the master plan be placed in the local newspapers for 2 weeks. And further, that the master plan report be posted on the township's website for public review in order to obtain feedback from the public, stakeholders, and agencies for a 30-day period. Do I have a mover? I have Chris and I have Rick seconding. Comments or questions? Go ahead, Trevor.
Rebail, yeah, just maybe just a comment. One of the things that I noticed, or at least when I was reviewing, like, this is a pretty technical document. So to get public input on a technical document of this caliber might be very difficult to get. My question would be, when we post it, once or if we get any comments or questions, my real thing would be to maybe alleviate the place where we have the capital project, like the table where it says, here's the capital projects that this plan is gonna follow. Like, people might have a more sense of the plan if they have a sense of what is the next steps in the plan, not necessarily the technical documentation aside to it. This is just my opinion. Like, it's 126 pages of and a lot of technical documentation in there that, you know, I'm not going to say I'm perfect and I can't know every technical dollar. That's one of the reasons why we have you give us the plan. But in all honesty, I think if we can, once the plan is approved and once it's in place, if staff could somehow segregate the plan in a sense that people can get information out of the plan that's important to them, that they can follow, it might be simplified in the sense of that may make it a little easier for people to digest as opposed to a 126 page technical document that they may or may not completely understand. And maybe they will. I'm just it was definitely a stretch for me on some of the pages, I will tell you that for a fact.
If I'm not
Go ahead, Donna.
Mary Bailey. So the whole plan in its entirety though has to be posted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's fine. And so
Yeah, I'm not suggesting not posting the entire plan. I'm saying post it, but let's, when we get to the point where we're putting the final plan on it, maybe put the final plan and then segregate or a summary of something that people can look at.
yeah, and what we're hoping for is that people in the notice, we have this big one-page notice ready to go into the newspapers tomorrow. So then they can contact either us here at the township or there's contact information at PM Ross as well to go over any, if there is questions and such. So we can, I'm not sure about some sort of a summary, Andrew, we can talk about what we could come up with to, in addition to all of this, to maybe be able to give as a handout or something. I'm not sure if that's what you were thinking, or.
To be quite fair, I'm looking only at the tables of the capital projects that people can then relate to. That's what people are gonna relate to.
Okay.
They're gonna relate to a Carling Terrace. Okay, so now what's the next on the list? And then they can understand that, so when we're budgeting, they're gonna see that we're gonna be budgeting these things, and they're gonna know that we're following, it's related to the plan. So when we document the budget, so we can understand that we're documenting to it the plan, and people know if we've got a 20-year capital plan now. So you live on Bob Street or whatever, you know, you may be a resident here for 20 years, you know, within 20 years, maybe you're gonna get a road done. It's a sense of people understanding what they have, what they can see. reading is one thing, but having that summary in my mind of capital projects in Blythe and in Wingham might simplify the discussion about where do I see my road in the near future, or do I even? Just a thought.
Just to follow up to Trevor too, it also would give people a better understanding of why we're tearing a road up, because so often you'll hear, why did this road get tore up when another road isn't physically in worse condition? Well, the reasoning is the infrastructure underneath, so a lot of people don't understand that, but if they have a heads up and say, well, we're not just digging it up because we thought to dig this one up today, it's because the infrastructure, which is the most important part of the road, needs to be done there, and unfortunately not on the road that may be a little rougher on the top end of the surface. Because that, I think, is a hard one to understand too, why we would tear up, or why we wouldn't be doing a street beyond one that's not paved now. Why we're not doing that street instead of fixing up this one is because this one has so much damage underneath. That's why we do it. Just thoughts, yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, I do believe I have movers for that, so I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Paul, can you just look down, is there anybody out there? Is Doug out there yet?
Yes, he is.
Okay, thank you. 6.2 is Doug Searson and Randy Von Haking, SZAM Capital Partners, the Maitland Estates Development Update. Hey, Douglas. Thank you for coming out.
So Doug, your presentation's on there.
On here?
Yep, if you just close out of this one, it'll be pulled up.
Oh, was it that one that was on there?
Yeah, it's set for 2 screens, so you might have to slide it over to the right, your presentation. Or I can come to it.
Good evening, sorry about the delay there. First comment I'd like to make is that I think we all know that 2020 is probably the longest year in history, going to go down in records of that, but at the same time, in many ways, it's been one of the most limiting years. I always like to recognize that there's a lot more people out there than me that are going through a lot more devastation with COVID-19 when I'm doing a presentation, so just to impress that upon the folks I talk to. I've only got a few minutes on this slide deck. I've circulated it ahead of time. I'm hoping that we can speed up and go through it. Everybody's had a chance to run through there. We just wanted to highlight our business plan, of course, and remind of the way that we're situated. All of this is fairly redundant for council since you've been following along your own market and the shortages of your housing issues. But we can definitively say, since we started our business plan 3 years ago to develop west of the 401, there's so much evidence, as you know here, of relocations, and COVID-19 has been a big part of that push. It's not only lent itself to displace people for less than positive reasons, but it's also showing people they can live in other places and they don't need to live inside congestion. So we run through those with everybody. Our team, of course, which you've had a chance to view on there. Our senior advisor to our GP group, which Reed Heritage Homes. You may have heard of Reed Heritage Homes up in Kitchener-Waterloo area. They've built tens of thousands of homes. Again, corporate structure, that's just for a disclosure statement to emphasize some of the complexities when dealing with multiple parties and a land trust as well as foreign ownership. I think this is a key slide that we wanted to focus on. What have we been doing, where are we at, and where do we stand today, and what have we accomplished? The listing there, of course, running down the list, the meetings, countless meetings with the co-owners. As you know, this is a vast number of co-owners in Malaysia and Singapore, Hong Kong, and parts of Taiwan, and Philippines as well. We ran a community open house. Tremendously good, positive feedback at the open house. I think if anybody was in attendance there from the council, I know some of you were, of course, there was maybe one not in my backyard kind of comment. And that votes really well for a developer and for the community. And even that, not my backyard, was more to do with sidewalk continuations than anything else when it came down to it after a few minutes of conversation. So those community open houses, proved to give us lots of understanding. As previously committed to and submitted, it's really the phase 1 and phase 2 between John Street and Highland Road that makes any sense at all from developing on this property. And that first phase of it connecting to behind the super school also led to many conversations with other developers, other investors who have a great interest in building purpose-built rentals, which I know also is a high demand in Huron County and Perth and Wellington and all through southwestern Ontario. We got a lot of interest on that particular aspect of it, which was tremendously good news. As I mentioned, continuous communication, 600 plus owners in Asia is not a easy undertaking. It's been challenging, but at the same time, the numbers coming out of the woodwork over the last year has been tremendously positive for us. So and I'll tail off into the rest of my dialogue, but the inevitable with when you're dealing with so many people, whether you've got 6 owners of a property or 600, is everybody has to agree on that. And not necessarily in the moment now, but certainly when you want to transfer title. So that first home that you transfer title to the first owner has to sever. And that's really the core of my focus. My day-to-day work is getting to that part of the transaction of knowing I can sever off and change title. So we're, as pointed out there, we've about $100,000 out now in unsecured investment into working through with the lawyers, engineers at Burnside here, and just trying to establish how do you navigate that. Now, the last line, of course, I think everybody can appreciate it's redundant. There's a bit of a curveball from March till onward, trying to deal not just with the regular course of business and our other projects that have similar situations with council meetings and as you would very well know better than I do, not being able to do public meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been juggling, to say the least, trying to navigate how do you keep everything moving forward at the same time that you have these challenges. That's been a tremendous time draw on us, but for the most part, we've been able to get past that. The engineering part 2, phase 2, part A and B, I think I got that phases wrong. That should be phase 1. That's just wrong in the slide deck, my apologies. So that's phase 1, parts A and B. That was just a tag in to show, again, council, that we have the list of deliverables that we know we need to do. This is the point that we're at with the co-owners at the moment, effective as of last Friday, where we are getting that connection, as I said, that one part hammered out, and the engineering that needs to be done with that. I might touch on this, I won't dwell on it, but we've had inquiries now since we listed Wingham as a potential property, a potential neighborhood, as far away as Quebec, for people who are looking for homes and stuff. I understand that's not a direct correlation maybe to what you need to solve here, because you got local employment issues, you want people locally to be able to buy homes. But it does vote well when you're talking about having, 550 some odd new homes between the two builds over the next 10 years. So the slide, what happens next? Clearly the continuation of where we're at right now is where we'd like to be. I'm just gonna bring it back up to the other slide at the end there and leave that on the screen. However, it's always good news and bad news. And I've got an obligation to report to your council what my status is in working with my 600 plus owners, not just to move the project forward in the development phase to get the draft plan approval deliverables completed and submit the subdivision application, but what also is the ability to navigate the ownership issues as I indicated. That's a tremendous undertaking just to get the owners all to agree to allow a transaction to happen. We know the subdivision application is the most important part, and that's my focus, to get that subdivision application and subdivide the property. From there, everything kind of falls into place. As council is fully aware, I know this is a large project, and there's many unique aspects to it, and as I mentioned, there's a lot of juggling. there's a lot of things that we had to do simultaneously. There's a lot of aspects that we've navigated. All, again, great words, but action is what you're looking for. We understand that. Everything was fine until about 5 weeks ago. And about 5 weeks ago, all of a sudden, we had this out of left field situation that came up. There was a serious series of events that we had a group of our owners in Malaysia come back to us and basically tell us that our numbers are wrong, our work is wrong, and that they really don't need us because this property is worth so much money that they could simply just sell the property to somebody else. Unfortunately, and I will submit my notes for council to review as well for your records. We didn't take this too seriously, but what we were told, and I reached out to your administration on this, what we were told was that council was entertaining a joint venture on this with the co-owners, which clearly would make my job very difficult. So I reached out and said, well, this doesn't make sense, and very quickly came to the same conclusion that I already had, which was this is not something that was being entertained, nor was it something that was being a directive or anything else being contemplated as a strategy. Between that time, about 5 weeks ago and now, and 5 weeks ago for the record, I did not know what the source was, aside from a few people in Malaysia who were part of our group where I get the information from them and they then say, oh, we've got this new information. But then it came to me that your local Remax real estate brokerage of record here, Renata Cyber Schlegel, in coordination with a Toronto-based realtor and a solicitor out of Toronto, we're up perpetuating and repeating this, not only to a few co-owners, but on video conferences and stating for your records that the township is in talks to JV, the co-owners, with the co-owners, and the property can easily be sold to another developer without delay, with no consequences. And this type of solicitation basically continued right until this weekend. So, I think it's important for you to understand that we are trying to do everything possible. And at no point do we really accept that as valid information. We didn't believe that was what was going on, as far as the conversations between your council and another party and, of course, the Malaysian co-owners. However, the reality is that it created a ton of confusion. And as we got the co-owners to a certain point to be able to accept that a subdivision application requires not only the application itself and the work and the engineering, but it also requires for them to then take that next step and know that that property will be subdivided and title will have to change at a certain point. So we did our best to put all of our resources at it. We did everything we possibly could, but unfortunately, this was a series of meetings from 4 a.m. on Sunday. I want to repeat that. This past Sunday, on Labor Day weekend, my staff, myself, we were all in my office, hosting meeting after meeting from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the morning. It's their Sunday night. That's when they like to get things done. And we were unsuccessful in convincing this small group that the prospect of selling this property at this giant premium price above our $3.18 million appraised value that the appraisers have put on this property at the stage it's at, we were unsuccessful in convincing them. It doesn't mean that they're done. It just means that I hope to be able to have that behind me about 2, 3, 4 months ago. COVID caused some delays in there, and then 5 weeks ago we got this out of left field new information from our friend at Remax leading the charge. So at this point, it's my regrets that I can't give you a definitive that we are in a position where we can have the co-owners agreed to move on to that subdivision application. It would be inappropriate for me to say otherwise. The ability for this property to be profitable for a developer, absolutely, and for the community, 100%, I get that. Everybody knows I'm from here. I was born here. I still say I'm from Wingham. I don't recognize myself as being from Waterloo. But short of sinking thousands of dollars more out of pocket into an unsecured position to go after what would be considered the Partitions Act. And I don't expect anybody here to know the Partitions Act, maybe the planners, maybe Dwayne. But the Partitions Act was really brought to light in Ontario and maybe Canada. I don't know exactly the history, I'm not a lawyer. But it's an expensive, slow process. And it is what needs to be done. Make no mistake, in a situation with multiple owners, the Partitions Act is used. But it's usually used in a case where you have an estate. Someone's passed away, someone can't be located. Not when you have 600 owners overseas. So part of our challenge was this prospect from, again, these 3 individuals, which is in my document for your records. I've just put their contact information in there. Providing this idea to my owners that Partitions Act is, go to court and be done with it. But that's not how it works. How it works is that you apply to a judicial system where you have COVID-19, where you don't have judges in court anymore, where they then have to understand the file, which means, again, in good faith and in reputation, there's no way I'd get in front of you and tell you that's an easy task. It's not an easy task, but it can be done. The challenge I'm having right now is getting an agreement with my ownership group, my co-owners, that it's inappropriate for us to continue to move forward if we're completely unsecured. And I'm hoping you can appreciate that, because we keep putting money up and we can't get ourselves secured unless we have that agreement in place. And as long as we have some people disagreeing, it delays us. And that's where we stand right now, delayed. So we think that the best course of action and the remedy is the Partitions Act, and that would require another draft plan extension. But at the same time, I'm also gonna have to go back and repair the relationships with the Malaysian group to figure out how to get them to accept that not only do you need to potentially solicit absolutely developers and maybe purchasers when the property is subdivided, but without a subdivided property, you have a property that's at, in my opinion, at threat to be moved back to a position where it would be farmable land with potentially a star beside it as residential proposed, and then eventually have a decision on it where that goes. None of this is the news that I want to bring today. I certainly didn't want to get up at 3 in the morning on Sunday on Labor Day weekend either and sit in meetings trying to figure out how to change the unfortunate opinion. My last statement is that SM Capital Partners and my affiliates at Kingwell Fine Homes, where we build and we solicit through our realtor group buyers, is still here to continue to advocate the development projects in North Huron. It hasn't changed our opinion. Our map shows that you're right there in the midst of our map. It's perfectly aligned. That's not something we drew after, we put Wingham on the map. Wingham was on the map when we drew our business plan. So at this point, all I can do is rely on the mechanisms at hand, which would be the co-owner group directing me to submit a draft plan extension.
Thank you, Douglas. I know how hard you worked on this. We know how hard you worked on this. We really wanted this to work. This has been a 10-year toothache. You were the dentist that was going to take care of that, and unfortunately, you've got a toothache too. I just want to thank you for everything you've done. I hope we can work this out or something out in the future. It has kept me at night, awake at night, as you know. You already know it's kept me up awake at night too.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's just been pure hell for me too. Because I'm not seeing a way out of this except farmland. But anyway, go ahead, Chris.
I'm just wondering through you, Reed, why we didn't get a formal statement from us that we're not.
I contacted
That's all it
administration.
takes. Like
Oh,
for
to
your for your investors, like a statement from us saying no. Doesn't that ride higher than a realtor's comment?
Quite possibly,
Well, it should.
but the timeline, the last message we tried to deal with was literally this Saturday. That it was suppressed, it was dealt with, it was answered, and then it came back again through. I can't describe it any other way than U.S. politics. Let's throw something on a social media board and see if it blows up something, and that's exactly what they did. The prospect of commission dollars, in my opinion, got in the way of reality. And it's, I'm not gonna disparage anybody's, abilities, but it's certainly clear to me that the two realtors and the solicitor that they were using out of Toronto, couldn't care less about what the progress is, no matter what they would tell me to try and convince me otherwise. I agree, a statement, good, and you can do that for me. And I can certainly circulate that, and certainly show them that the only way out of this is to move forward the way we present it. And we've been consistent. We record all of our video conferences. I have now 200 plus hours, and they're all recorded, as well as the one where I had these remarks that have been made to us. I mean, the owners can watch it, and I can only do is push it back in front of them and state that. At one point, there was a letter generated to remind us of the importance of the subdivision approval, and we posted that letter immediately about 4 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, wasn't that long, well, 3 weeks ago. And there was a lot of positive response saying, okay, we get it. And then come Saturday, which is why I was up at, I wasn't scheduled to get up at 4 in the morning to be in my office. It's just with the time zone difference, the messages started coming in on Saturday, and I thought I'm just gonna get up and go in and light up the video conferences, so.
Kevin?
Through you, two questions. One was partially answered, the other councillor's question, but, were you able to substantiate any of the, remarks or allegations from, RE/MAX?
Yeah, it's on video transcripts. It's
So-
recorded videos.
No, I meant, were you able to substantiate that, yes, there was conversations from municipality to RE/MAX?
No, and I was able to only get back from conversations with the REIV and with the CAO that these inquiries came in with regards to having other consultations, but no presentations, no meetings, anything took place with council.
The second one was a question I posed to you first when you had the roundtable in at the arena about a year ago. The lands, there's been other subdivisions much like this, that the lands have been tied to foreign citizenship, owning land here in order for them to get a citizenship to be able to travel back and forth. And that sounds scaringly familiar to not being able to get the lease for the land to transfer into someone else's name, that is, could possibly be the truth of this. And if that is, those lands will be locked as long as those participants from foreign countries wish to have Canadian citizenship in this country, because they require that to stay or to move here. And that would mean that we would never be able to get that land for development, because once they develop it, they lose that advantage. So I was just curious that would lead to our commencing with any further development of that piece of land, if that is tied to it. And if you have any knowledge of that being tied to it, I'd sure like to know.
Yeah, Councillor, I am familiar with that setup. It's actually been used heavily in part of Western Canada, as well as in the United States, especially in Texas, where it's you buy a piece of the investment and then you get your ability to apply for your PR card, your residence card. It's not my belief that this particular group had any intent or motivation on that avenue at all. For the most part, this group was quite content with anything that would move this forward, and I think I can be quoted back from that meeting, that same meeting where I said to the 100 people that came out to the open house that they are no different than the people sitting in that room. They're in a room over there with 100 of them going, how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this? The unfortunate thing, as I stressed, is that when misinformation jumps in the middle between, and you're working from 12-hour time differences, and appreciation for your comment, Councillor, that you're trying to figure out what's the message that's going to help to calm down this one, and all of a sudden this one over here lights up. It's incredibly difficult, but I do not believe that anybody in this particular group has that motivation. I've stressed to them, and they'll be able to, I assume when we see this council meeting, I've stressed to them that if you subdivide, you're going to have a much better chance of recouping the capital you've invested by working through those phases. And if the worst case scenario, and hopefully this isn't, I don't have a planner tell me if I'm wrong, but the worst case scenario that you end up owning a few lots in the last phase because you still can't, get rid of your trust on the ownership with that agreement that you have, then that should be the worst case scenario. And I've never once had anybody, even introduce the idea of, residency and being tied to the land, so.
Good, Chris?
Yeah, through you, Reeve. Has this been pulled by a realtor in any of the other investment locations?
Not to my knowledge, each one of the previous 8A projects seem to have a fairly unique situation happening. Unique from our perspective, not maybe unique from your view. Everybody's kind of stuck because of the way the ownership groups are. In Blue Water in Godrich, the property is just too far out of the development zone. It's just not of interest to anybody, so it's why it's stalled. So I don't see that happening. We do have a situation in Angus with a piece of property that's similar. There's an investment group that has 1/3 of it, who's very much in favor of just liquidating it for pennies in the dollar. And of course, the co-owners would not like to do that. They would like to see it sold at market price. So you have different interests. Wingham is the divide that's happening now is a small group of Malaysian investors who have been convinced that this property should yield them so much leverage over your community, over your council, over your local investor dollars, over my money, that we should just throw ourselves and throw that price up. Just again, for your records, our offer to them when we put the deal together for them was to recoup 100% of their capital and split any other profits above that number at a 25-75, so that they would receive 25% of every profit dollar after we developed through that. Where they are looking at a differential, I guess, in opinion, is their opinion is that they could do it today, because a realtor has told them they can just sell it today and there's no consequences, and you just start the planning process over again.
Anyone
And
else?
to be specific, when I say realtor, there's two of them. One based in Toronto and of course the one based here.
Same company.
Actually, two different companies.
Oh.
One is with Sutton Group Associates.
Wait, Kevin?
Let's follow up through you, Reeve. Actually, it's to staff. Is council required to accept any other development planning, or do we have a right to say no? What I'm getting at is that they were saying that they've got so much potential leverage over council. Does council also have leverage back to them to say, well, even if you do want to do that, no?
So their first biggest problem is they've got, 30 days left, Doug, before the subdivision falls through?
Yeah, you've got October 5th is my application date for
Yeah.
the application for extension. January 2nd, 2020 is the end of the extension.
Yeah, it all falls through then.
But I'm
Because
just saying
of
that
Doug
they're banking on being able to just go through and fly through. I think they would find that this council would be very adamant at dragging their feet for.
Well, again, we've been 8-10 years with this headache, and I think it's time anyway. Unless one of the staff have something to add, I believe it's 30 days, and they've got 30 days to decide what they're gonna do with it, or we have the right to turn it back into pasture land. Go ahead,
Well, so through you, your worship, in terms of council grant an extension for draft plan approval until January 2nd of 2021. And unless that is extended by support, county council makes that decision, but they obviously reach out to local municipality in terms of what your position is. So essentially, in the absence of an extension request coming before council, it lapses on January the 2nd. Council has if you don't get a request for an extension, it just automatically lapses. As Doug has indicated, in terms of, in order to get the necessary approvals, if there was an extension request and subject to support of this council and county council, is October the 5th. The request for the extension needs to be received by us by October the 5th. We would then prepare a report, it would come to this council, you would then, similar to as we did before, whether you wish to support an extension or not. And if you're supportive or not supportive, whatever you recommend then goes to county council, and then county council makes the decision itself. But in the absence of an extension request, the draft plan approval lapses. You can't, I guess, you just can't go and extend it, unless you receive a request.
Go ahead, Trevor.
But in essence, we as a municipality have invested staff resources to this project for 8 years. As well as Doug's firm has now invested $100,000 of unsecured money into this project. The question I have is if draft plan approval is denied, if we do not extend it or county doesn't extend it, what is this, what are the investors to lose? Like what is really the question about, because they're gonna lose something. They've invested capital in this project up until now. And my question is, does somebody know what that number is? Because I hear it all the time, well, we're losing something out of this. Yes, we are. North Huron is losing residential housing and potential tax income to alleviate the pressures that we have. And we know and we believe that we can get that residential housing if we develop it. We know from information that we've got that can sell, and we know that. So yes, we are losing, but in my mind, they're losing more. But I want to reiterate but the question is we can't tell them that's something they have to learn on their own, I guess, that they're going to have some type of loss in this deal, other than the fact that if they continue to think that land is worth $6 million, then I think they're going to hold on till the cows come home, if that's what they believe. So does staff know, like, what is the value of that? What is the value that they're potentially at loss if we do not increase or extend draft plan approval? Do we have an idea? Doug, do you know?
No, through your worship, as far as, so if draft, I in terms of the numbers, I don't know, to be honest. But in terms of once or if draft plan approval lapses, in order for any development to happen on those lands, and if it was by virtue of plan of subdivision, whoever is doing development on those lands essentially starts over at day one. So in terms of, as you're aware, in terms of Hutton Heights, all the work that we've been doing on Hutton Heights, whoever was to acquire that land would have to do everything we're doing in terms of all the studies, all the reports. So all of that money, for example, that has been invested in all that work that's been done, the engineering, the archaeological, the environmental, all that, that's all gone. Whoever acquired it would have to start over, like right from scratch. So essentially, and think going back to Doug's comment, or a comment I heard in terms of, it has, as I'll call it agricultural land, it has a value. With draft plan approval, it has an increase in value, just by virtue of the fact that once you clear the conditions, then you can start developing those lands. But when you lose that draft approval, then essentially it goes to the value of agricultural land, in my mind. Because, again, you have to start over.
I'm happy to comment. Through public records and through publicized documents from 8A, you can find that the purchase price of this land was $1.6 million. The co-owners who own this land today, who purchased it from 8A, paid $11.25 million for it. So that's the spread. And when we did the appraisal at 3.18, we thought we'd come in at 4.5, based on market demand, but the market demand here is immeasurable. As part of my comments to council when I first presented, is that we needed to generate market here in order to actually establish a market value so that an appraiser has something to draw comparisons from. Our appraisal, our opinion was in the $4.5 to $5 million, and the appraisal came in at 3.18, and that of course was what we based our then plan to go for A and B as a way to minimize the capital requirement to get things going, establish 45 lots of market value, knowing that they're gonna sell. Then we have now a market value, which means we can go back to other sources of income, investors, developers, purchasers of the other phases, and accelerate the whole process. Again, I don't believe that the motivation behind the co-owners, and I wanna stress that it's not all of the co-owners who are thinking this way. It's the unfortunate reality that a small group think this way, and that just generated, in essence, during my voting process, a whole whack of people who said, I'm just confused, so I don't wanna do anything. Which of course, I think we share the opinion that's the most dangerous thing that they could have done. Whether or not we were able to articulate it properly, we take responsibility for that. But we did spend hours and hours and hours explaining it in plain language that the most important thing to do is get the subdivision application forward. So they do have something to lose. And there's many of them who are not happy right now that I'm stalled because of the situation, just as I face you guys with the same problem. You're both in the same proverbial boat on two different lakes, is what it looks like to me. And so there is a motivation for them, and I can continue to dialogue with them, and I can continue to push and seek at least the consent on an application for extension and report back on October 5th. I do take the words,
Palmer.
thank you, Councilor Palmer's advice as well. At request, I would gladly, openly take any strongly written communication that I can share with the co-owners so that it can be directly given to the co-owners and not be via third-party interpretations. To help that go through.
Any other questions? Well, Douglas, you've given us a lot to think about. This is no further ahead than we were a year and a half ago. Unfortunately, you have spent a lot of time and energy. Maybe we can make something work. We don't know. But this is not what we wanted to hear. This is not what you wanted to deliver. We had such good vibes moving forward. Whatever happens, happens. I don't know. Go ahead, Trevor.
So Rita, I guess my question is that what I'm hearing is, does council right now want to continue, to have Doug continue the process, at least getting the potential, the discussion of an October 5th subdivision request? Because if we don't get the request, it isn't gonna matter to us, like we can't do anything about it anyways. If we don't get a request, we can't extend it anyways. So really, it's whether we want Doug to go from September the 8th to October the 5th to try to get the investors back on side to get a subdivision agreement transition. And then, in the same breath, provide direction to staff to provide every letter that we potentially can to say that the only person we're dealing with is that individual right there. We're not talking to anybody else. And here's the motion that says that. I'm hearing that. That's what I'm hearing, because we really, if we stop now, if we don't say anything today, I don't know if Doug, I don't know if we don't say anything today, are you anticipating trying to continue to do till October 5th or was it your intention to let us ask you that? I guess I'm struggling with who's doing the request and who's pushing. I think we both want the same thing, which is we want development on those lands, but they have to ask for the request, and the only person that could ask for the request is the investors.
Correct.
So that's the part for me.
Your ballpark. What do you,
First of all, uncharted territories. So we are a little further ahead than we were a year ago, and that's now, we do have the full database of the owners. That's something that we did accomplish, and that took a tremendous amount of time to get that completed. So we are a tiny hair ahead, not much. If I have clarity through communication, documentation, and council's endorsement, I guess I'll say, that the willingness to move forward as the plan presented is there, and I need this, I need to submit a draft plan extension by October 5th, and I can get them to agree to that, then we can continue. That investment on our part is the cost of a draft plan extension and a few more hours of video conference calls. So relatively low cost compared to the $175,000 of engineering that's required to get us to that next step on the subdivision application. So yes, I would take those steps. I'll state again for your records, as I've said all along the way, I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's the right, thing to do for the owners and for the community, and that's where we've stood since day one. Just to erase this is a windfall for our company, because it might be profitable a little bit, but it's not looking like a windfall today.
so do I have a councillor putting a motion forward?
I will move that. I'll move that, that council authorize Doug to continue discussions with, the ownership group to get a potential draft plan approval extension by October the 5th,
I have a seconder.
and as well as, recommend staff to provide Doug with any letter indicating such need that he requests as it relates to who we're talking with and who we are not talking with
The
in
truth.
regards to this
The
ownership.
truth.
Through your worship,
Yes.
the one clarification I put there is that council recommends Doug to continue, not that we authorize Doug to continue, because as Doug is not our employee, right?
That's right. So as noted by the clerk.
Okay. And you're still good with seconding?
You bet.
So I'm gonna get the clerk to read that back. And is there any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Do we have any do we have any recourse to demand a retraction from Remax?
Which are you more interested in?
Council?
Reed, the only other comment I want to make is for the people who are, North Huron cannot develop this land without the owners. We cannot do anything with that land. So I want to make that abundantly clear. We cannot do anything with that land without ownership, because we as a municipality do not own that land. So this is the only option that we have, in my mind, to continue this potential development. That's it. We don't have any other option, in my mind.
And we have a fine deadline on this one.
May I make a last comment?
You may, my friend.
One of the issues that may arise, assuming that I get permission, and assuming I can fill out the draft plan extension, is the unwillingness for the co-owners being faced with the price that they paid for the land and what the appraised value is to invest any more money themselves. So one of the challenges is funding. As we've been funding it, and as we will, that will be a challenge. And that will be where maybe there is some negotiating leverage from within the community, parts of the community, whatever it might be. And I say that not because we're looking for us to be funded. As we have lying investors, we have $1 million of investor money sitting there, was earmarked for this project. It's gonna move to Hamilton now just because of the delay. I say it because the end remedy to be be able to complete everything is the Partitions Act. And that is a process that requires legal to step up and walk that process through the courts. So no matter what, that process should start. And if I was a citizen or I was a local person, I'd like to see that process start. And that does not take 600 people to agree.
Having said that, though, our motion is to back you on continuing forward, how, you get developers and all that again.
Understood.
You know, as I've said before, I represent the township of North Huron and I'll stay out of. Okay?
Through your worship, so am I good to read
Yes.
the motion now? So the motion on the floor is that the council of the township of North Huron hereby recommends that Sazam continue to pursue the process with the co-owners for submitting an extension of the draft plan of subdivision. And further, that council directs staff to provide a letter to Sazam explaining that the township has not pursued a potential joint venture for the property.
That's good?
That's good.
It's good, counsel? And I have a mover and a seconder, so any more comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor? Carries. Thank you, Douglas.
Stay safe,
Good luck.
everyone. Thanks, Doug.
Okay.
Ruth?
Yes,
We're
my
still through, I don't know whether it requires a motion or not, but, because of this bit of a setback, I would like to make a motion that we go forward more heartily with property that we already own for our development of new properties, and we can put an asterisk on it, that, you know, that's the high priority rather than hanging our hat on.
Yep.
Because that Petitions Act will take 10 years.
And that's a motion?
Through your worship,
Yes.
if it helps, staff are already well aware of the need to push those forward.
Okay,
I withdraw that one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think direction has been
Yeah.
all noted and seconded more than once
Okay.
already.
So I already had that pass, everything's good on that one?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so let's go down to reports, the clerk's department, the off-road vehicle bylaw. Carson, I'm gonna get you to speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as council's aware, on November 4th of 2019, a delegation was here from the Huron Shores ATV Club. And the purpose of this delegation at the time was to ask council to permit ATVs on municipally owned roads within the township. Basically, in order to allow ATVs to enter the Wingham Ward for the purposes of obtaining food and fuel. And then, so as council will also be aware, following this delegation, a letter was received from Huron Public Health advising of the upcoming provincial legislation changes regarding off-road vehicles on municipal roads. So as a result of that letter, Laura Edker of Huron Public Health attended the February 3rd, 2020 council meeting as a delegation. And as part of this delegation, she provided information related to the legislative changes as well as other areas for council's consideration on the matter. So as council will have seen this in the staff report, the first part that I have there is related to the legislation changes, so I'll just provide a quick overview of what those entail. So in particular, there's two legislation changes. One is the legislation changes under the Getting Ontario Moving Act, and then the second one is the Better for People, Smarter for Businesses Act. So first, in relation to the Getting Ontario Moving Act, the Highway Traffic Act currently, as it's written, allows for regulations and municipal bylaws to be passed permitting the operation of off-road vehicles on municipal roads. However, if no bylaw is in place, off-road vehicles are not allowed on municipal roads. But however, with this, the passing of the Getting Ontario Moving Act, the Highway Traffic Act is being amended to specify that such regulations and bylaws may now be passed prohibiting the operation of off-road vehicles. And so based on these changes, the recommendation is it's deemed advisable to pass a bylaw for the operation, for regulating off-road vehicles regardless of council's stance on it. And the reason for this is that basically the what's called the legislative onus has reversed. So now, if you don't have a bylaw, as of the set date when this legislation takes effect, they'll be able to operate on municipal roads regardless. And so the targeted implementation date for that legislation by the province is January 1st of 2021. The second change, so as I mentioned, is the Better for People, Smarter for Businesses Act. And so this amended the Highway Traffic Act to enable municipalities to allow all or some types of off-road vehicles to be driven on municipal highways, subject of course to the regulations in the provincial legislation. So in other words, what this means is that now municipalities have the ability to allow additional types of off-road vehicles that they couldn't have necessarily allowed before. And so as council have seen in the attached materials, the types of permitted off-road vehicles now are what are referred to as a single rider ATV, a two-up ATV, recreational off-highway vehicles, utility terrain vehicles, extreme terrain vehicles, and off-road motorcycles. And so if for reference, there was pictures associated with each of those type of off-road vehicles in your package. And this legislative change took effect on July 1st. So this legislation is already in effect, and any of those 6 vehicles can now be permitted on municipal roads. So due to the reverse onus of the that will be in effect in January, and overall the legislative changes, basically as staff we found it prudent to prepare a draft bylaw that would regulate all off-road vehicles, knowing that we would eventually have to do so anyways to meet that January 1st, 2020 targeted deadline. So the second portion of the report is what's been developed as the draft off-road vehicles bylaw. And so this bylaw was developed based on comments and considerations provided by a number of entities, including North Huron Public Works, County of Huron Public Works, North Huron Bylaw Enforcement, the Huron OPP, AON Insurance, and County of Huron Economic Development, and then as well as the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. And so, as I mentioned, we took those comments into consideration, as well as the experiences of other municipalities in the area and of municipalities of similar nature to North Huron, and we developed this draft bylaw for council's consideration. So the rest of the report is specific sections which really give effect to the bylaw, which helps council regulate and reduce the liability. So I guess if council sees benefit, I could go through those in more detail to kind of explain what they mean, or if not, then we are good to discuss as they're there. I guess the important thing to note is, as is with all those provisions, there's also a set fine schedule attached to it, which you will have saw as Schedule B to the bylaw. And so with any set fine schedule, these fines are forwarded to the Ministry of the Attorney General for review and comment. And so the ministry has reviewed these, they provide wording back, these changes were implemented, and so then if council passes this bylaw, the final version will be sent to the Ministry of the Attorney General for approval, and they'll provide their approval back. And I guess the only other thing that I want to note is this bylaw was also sent to for review from the Road Safety Program Development Office of the Ministry of Transportation, and no concerns were provided upon their review.
Okay, before we have a comment, I'd like to see if I'm going to read the motion, get a mover. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the clerk dated September 8th, 2020 regarding the off-road vehicle bylaw for information purposes. And further, the council directs the clerk to finalize and bring forward a bylaw to permit the regulation of operating of off-road vehicles on municipal highways within the Township of North Huron for council's consideration at the September 21st, 2020 regular council meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, seconder. I have Rick. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Kevin.
It's a comment through you, Reeve. I think it's a sad time when this legislation is coming down, that it's leaving so many people in our communities in doubt. Unfortunately, all these vehicles that they're talking about do not have lights, do not have signal lights, brake lights, indicators. Most of them don't have seat belts, making it legal for them to drive down the driven portion of the road and leave our disabled and handicapped in the lurks. A mobility scooter has lights, horns, brake lights, turn lights, headlights, and is still not permitted to drive on the driven portion of the road in town. And in town where I live, we have very limited sidewalks, and the use of them is on the roadway, which is illegal. This particular legislation does not take into the consideration of those individuals on, as they call, I guess, recreational vehicles. I wouldn't call it, I would call them mobility aid, but unfortunately it leaves them out. And it's unfortunate for them to see someone with, you know, supercharged 200 horsepower side-by-side with tractor tires on going down Main Street and being perfectly legal and not being able to go up to groceries without having to worry about whether you're breaking the law as a handicap or as a senior in a community or sporting event or social event, the use of a golf cart in town. It is totally illegal. Leaving them out of this equation and allowing only one portion, I think is a derelict of provincial and community betterment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through your worship, if I can just clarify one thing, so, under the Off-Road Vehicles Act, there are equipment requirements, so, so there's a section there on braking systems and lamps, like, as in headlights and stuff like that, right? So, you can't just, oh, I have a off-road vehicle, I'm just gonna drive it everywhere, right? You still have to have licensing, you still have to have insurance, you still have to, you have to meet all the requirements of the Off-Road Vehicles Act. So it's not like you can just get in any old off-road vehicle, right? So that, I just wanted to clarify that one.
Just as a result, anyone with a disability through their insurance will only be able to purchase a mobility device. It will not allow them to purchase a vehicle that is listed in here to get from point A to point B in town.
Yeah.
So,
I'm actually gonna follow with that, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Trevor. I have to agree with Kevin, especially in the Blythe area. I've had a lot of comments, I've had a lot of concerns. I've actually been driven around the town by your PIA president showing me the tons and tons of vehicles. As I stated when this first came out, the concern is when you're near schools and when you're near hospitals and when you're near nursing homes, because a lot of these units are revved up. I am really glad to hear that we'll have a way to find them now. That makes me very happy. And I know I just lost 10,000 votes, but I don't care. But I have to agree with you, Kevin, that this does concern me, the fact that the way it's going, and you're right. This is kind of going against disability people by not endorsing it, and my mother has a scooter.
My rebuttal is, I'm not against the legislation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just against that it didn't go and cover
Far enough.
all the vehicles using the roadways.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Oh, Trevor, you were next.
Yeah, I want to, I guess just a question or a comment more to Councillor Faulkner's. Your issue is with the Ontario legislation, not with this current bylaw. Is that correct?
Yes, I was just curious as why they would allow an 8-wheeled vehicle, but not a mobility scooter.
Right.
I just don't see the.
Yeah, so I have to agree with the councillor, obviously, but we don't have the ability to change the legislation, and I think that's part of it, where comments to the legislation or to the government about those comments might be beneficial for us to communicate that, and maybe those can be enhanced in future changes to the legislation maybe. I don't know. My concern over the bylaw is, and it will always be, is enforcement.
Yeah.
It's going to be enforcement. It's going to be enforcement because right now, how I see this, I'm assuming it's the bylaw enforcement officer is going to be enforcing it. Who is going to be enforcing it?
Through your worship, so the bylaw would be enforced by the OPP as well as bylaw enforcement would have the ability to. However, the OPP said that it would just be treated as any other routine traffic stop, right? And that's how they would engage these off-road vehicle users.
Kevin?
For you, Ray, question to staff. Do we have the ability to enforce
Through the bylaw officer?
bylaw to allow, to like an amendment to that to allow mobility scooters on our roads just so they have I don't, maybe we don't, I mean, because of how we travel.
So, through your worship, not under this legislation.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Yeah,
wasn't-
so we definitely couldn't incorporate something in this bylaw, as this is related to off-road vehicles as outlined by the legislation. However, at the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting that I attended a couple weeks ago, your same concerns came up, not in relation to linking it with this, but addressing that to help those with mobility issues get around easier. So there is potential that the legislation will change to address this, and as staff, we will definitely continue to keep our eye on that, and if there's any options that we can use in North Huron Pacific specifically, we will definitely move those forward and present those to council for options.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Kevin, I do understand exactly where you're coming from, and I really wish it was being addressed here, but it is off-road only. My only problem, and I'm really happy with this, my only problem are with the motorcycles, the off-road motorcycle. I was guilty of that when I was younger, so I know how noisy they get. Mine had lights and a license plate, because it was an enduro type, but the motocross type, which are included in here, because they're the competitive ones, that's the motocross jobs. They have no lights, and they're noisy as heck, because they're tuned that way. And I know it talks about, it should have lights, and it's gotta be licensed and insured, and that's great. So it might tone it down, but I don't know if it'll affect the noise level, but I know it did address our noise bylaw as well. So that could be something where the complaints start, but that was my only real concern about it.
Okay, thank you.
Your worship, I could, if it helps appease you at all, Councilor Palmer, I know, so as you mentioned, it's designed around our noise bylaw, right? So you can't operate an off-road vehicle at any time of night. Just the other piece in there too is there is a set fine for, let me pull up the bylaw here.
$200 or something.
Yeah, so no person shall operate an off-road vehicle in such a way to disrupt or destroy the natural environment or create a nuisance by method of frequency or operation on municipal property or upon any other highway within the municipality. So basically what that means is you can't just continuously go up and down the same street, and which you get the noise complaints, right? So basically the bylaw is written, so if you're in an urban area, the bylaw requires you to you have to take the most direct route on the roads that are permitted out of the built-up urban area to get to your destination, right? So you can't just go up and down the urban streets for the sake of doing so.
Yeah.
Kevin first, and then back to you.
No, I answered my question just by
Leslie?
rereading the act.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
A point I've heard from a taxpayer a little while ago is they live near county forest, and there's biker guys and ATV guys coming from Goliath and the kids, and they go right in there, they destroy the place. You know what I mean by a forested, county forest, eh? And people that normally walk it, they can't, and there's problems. So, I suggested the police, I was at odds of what to say, and this person was a little worried about this coming to fruition. And, okay, yeah, I agree. So is there a way of working with county as well? Because it's their responsibility, it's their forest, and they should protect it from people that are abusing it. Because they shouldn't be in there at all. There's signs and everything.
Yeah.
Through your worship, so the bylaw is related to municipal roads,
Yeah.
right? So if someone is driving an off-road vehicle on an area that's prohibited anyways, that would be considered trespassing, right? So whether if the property owner is the county can definitely go and enforce that. So just like all of our complaint processes, they're all complaint driven, so whether it's to the county, if it's their property, or it's to us, there's definitely merit to having those people fill out the resident complaint form, and we'll see whether it's something in our jurisdiction that we can address, or if not, we will point it to the appropriate entity, whether that's the OPP or the county.
Okay, I don't believe I have, go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve, in the report, it also said that there weren't any problems from South Huron, they had the odd complaint, and Huron East. And they've been had this for the last, I think, almost 10 years, 11 years. So there are places that it is working, so I just want to bring that point forward.
Trevor?
The only other thing is that you know, this is not up for approval tonight, so it's more, it's the public who's watching here tonight, and that they provide feedback over the next week to 2 weeks till our next council meeting, and then if when the bylaw is presented, we can ask the clerk if any communication has been provided to the municipality, and if you hear someone from constituents, then we can at least ask those questions before we pass the bylaw. At this point, it's just a draft, and I think obviously it's been well documented, well communicated, and let's see where it goes from here.
I don't believe I have a mover or a seconder.
Through you, yeah,
Yep.
you do.
I do. Okay, in that case, I'm gonna call the vote. All in favor? Carries. 7.2.1, tax refund. I'm gonna get a mover first, Donna. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Director of Finance dated September 8th, 2020 regarding tax refund under section 357-1D1 of the Municipal Act in the amount of $268.98, and further, the Council of Township of North Huron hereby approves adjustments to the collector's roll as recommended by the Director of the Finance in the report dated September 8th, 2020. I'm gonna get a mover and a seconder and then have Donna speak to this. I've got Kevin and I've got Paul. Donna, do you mind?
Thank you, Reed. So we've received an application under section 357 of the Municipal Act for tax reduction in regard to this particular property had a barn that was demolished late in 2019. So this amount covers $12.25 for December of 2019, and then the assessment for all of 2020s, which is $256.73. So the total of that is $268.98. And as I said, it's because the barn was demolished. The application was submitted to MPAC, and they came back with this recommended amount of assessment reduction. We have to follow procedures, so this public meeting is part of those procedures, which meets the act. And the other piece is that if the applicant is present, and that is Eric and Maureen Hoff, and I don't see them here tonight. So if they were here, they are asked. They are to be asked if they wish to comment on their application. They received notice that this recommendation for approval was coming to council tonight. And also as noted, we do budget this year we budgeted $36,600 in the budget to address this type of application. And we've had just over $4,000 in various types of applications under that budget item. So I have no concerns with it, and I would make this recommendation to council to approve this. Okay, questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.2.2 recall update that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report from the Director of Finance regarding staff recall updates dated September 8th, 2020 for information purposes. Do I have a mover? I have Anita, seconder. I have Rick. Donna, could you speak to that one too? Yes, Reed. So as reported at the July 6th council meeting, further to that, I'm pleased to report that as at the end of July, all of our full-time staff and a number of our part-time staff have now returned to work off of layoff due to the COVID-19 measures. At the time of this report, we still have one part-time casual staff member who is eligible for top-up who is still off, and that person is off because the position that they have relates to programs offered by the daycare which are up and running at this point. So that's the reason why they are still off. We do have some other supply staff and students who have not been called back, and that will be in conjunction with as facilities still continue to open. So I just wanted to give you an update. Council had originally approved the top up for 12 weeks, which was then extended to 6 weeks. The government has further extended that program to 28 weeks, but at this time we are still working under the 16-week guideline that ended on July 24th of 2020. So financially, I just wanted to let you know that out of the $61,000.80 that we had approved for this program, we paid the top up the first round of staff that returned. We had a number of these staff returning today, and so they'll get their 16-week top up later on in September. There's some paperwork we have to do, etc. So that will leave $3,516 left still remaining out of the original allocation. So then again, just to point out though that there are a number of staff who are off a lot longer than the 16 weeks, meaning most of them off an additional 6 weeks, returning today. So then at this point, council has only approved the 16-week top up, so that's the numbers that we're working under at this point.
Questions, comments, or concerns for Donna? I have one, Donna. Are you planning on bringing back another request for the rest of the term, or this is it? We're done with the recalls today. You said there was a few more that were still not back, and you hadn't budgeted them in on the 61,000.
Right. So the ones who are not back, there's only one of those that would be eligible for the top up, but they would only get the 16 weeks top up. The one person who's not back may be off 26 weeks, for example. We don't know when that last program will open. So.
Okay. Anyone else? Not hearing any. I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Okay, we're going to go to Recreation and Community Services, 7.3.1, CR 2020-16 RFP results for the supply and implementation of a recreation management software system. Do I have a mover? I have Anita. Do I have a seconder? I have Paul. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Trevor.
Can we have the department head talk to it, please?
Oh, yes, sorry. Hey, Vicki, it's your turn.
That's okay. Thank you, Your Worship. Before council this evening is a report regarding the outcome of the RFP that was released for the replacement of the recreation management software system. As you may recall, during the budget process, staff indicated the licensing and maintenance agreement for the use of the current recreation management software system was due to expire in November 2020. As such, staff recommended that the recreation management software be put out for RFP and to determine if there was some potential cost savings and ensure there was efficiencies with the systems. The project was included in the 2020 budget, and although staff had hoped to undertake the project in the spring, due to COVID-19, it was one of the projects that was postponed. In July, staff brought forward a report requesting permission to move ahead with the project. After receiving council's approval, staff prepared and released an RFP for the supply and implementation of the new software system. The RFP indicated that the new software would be required to perform reservations for drop-in activities, program registration, both online and in person, facility bookings, memberships, point of sale, and produce a variety of reports relating to program stats, revenue generation, facility usage, and of course, financial information. The RFP also indicated that the system would have to operate on an accrual accounting basis. The accruals accounting system is required so that the system would be more compatible with our financial system, which is Keystone, that's used here at the municipality, or at the town hall office. The RFP did close on Friday, August 28th. In total, there were 3 proposals received. The 3 proposals were reviewed and evaluated based on a weighted scoring criteria, which is included in the RFP. The criteria dealt with project understanding, expertise, and commitment of resources, the implementation and timeline, project costs, and annual licensing and maintenance fees. Based on the overall scores, staff are recommending the contract be awarded to Ennosoft Fusion Software out of London, Ontario. Ennosoft Fusion Software received the highest overall scoring and was within our budget. As part of their submissions, the proponents were required to submit annual maintenance and licensing fees for 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year terms. Based on the review of the proposal, it would appear that the longer the term, the greater the benefit for the municipality, as there will be cost savings. Therefore, staff are recommending the township enter into a 5 year annual maintenance and licensing agreement with Ennosoft. Given the annual cost to license and maintain the system, as well as fees for processing credit cards, debit cards, e-transfers, etc., staff are also recommending that these costs be passed on to the users because it affects a specific group of people in the tax base and users of the facilities. We're recommending that those costs be incorporated in the 2021 recreational fees, which will be about the same time when this new software program will be implemented. And so that would cover both the annual maintenance licensing costs and the credit card fees. By doing so, the township would be able to reduce its operating costs by approximately $20,000. As mentioned previously, the recommended proposal is below budget. This would result in a cost savings of approximately $3,000. It is recommended this amount be returned to the reserves to offset future software costs. And staff are further recommending that the township review its software needs on a 3 to 5 year basis to ensure operational efficiencies and take advantage of the competitive marketplace.
Thank you. Questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Trevor.
My only comment is the comment of passing on the licensing fees and the credit card processing. I have to agree. I agree in theory. In theory, I agree with that comment. Is that they should pass on to the users of the rec service. In actuality, I'm assuming we look at our rates and compare them to somewhere that's relatively closer, and my assumption is going to be that I don't foresee us being able to recuperate 100% of those costs in the annual membership fees. Is my guess. I'm just spitballing a conversation here because I don't. My argument is that I don't know that you're going to be able to pass on all of those costs and be able to justify, otherwise than saying justification is that this is why North Huron's costs are greater than X municipality's costs. That may be right, but I guess my assumption is that in the normal fees bylaw we look at comparatives compared to around the area, and if we're going to continue to do that, I don't see us increasing our costs substantially if it ends up being that way. I just don't see us, because the increase in value is going to take it away from the utilization, which then in turn just regurgitates the amount of money that we're paying for the building, and it's being underutilized. So in theory, I think it's a great, I would have expected those already to be incorporated in the prices. So maybe if that hasn't been the case, I think we're off kilter a little bit already. But I guess in theory, it's a great theory. I just would like to see it in actuality before we determine whether those are gonna be the way it's actually gonna be weighed.
Vicky, did you want to speak to that?
Through you, your worship, as you know, I've only been here 2 years, 2 years in October. I have to admit, I was actually surprised upon coming here that was not being recouped. The amount of costs associated with an annual licensing fee and the credit card fees were not being recouped. Where I was prior, my former employer, we did recoup those costs. And we did it at the time when we implemented the new software. And we set it up in that way so that the taxpayers were not paying for that. We weren't on our own. It was actually, we were in a collective group that had done some bulk purchasing for the software. So it was a group of municipalities together so that we could get the costs down in terms of like the annual operating costs and things like that. But some of them chose not to do the credit card fees. They chose not to try to recoup those costs, but they did increase their fees to cover off on this annual maintenance and licensing.
Just Chris first.
I just wanna say, Reeve, that, it's only good business sense. You do that, every business out there does it. And we're a business, yes, there's a service, but it's still, we are a business.
Trevor?
Yeah, I think if we're not making it complicated in the sense that where you're trying to incorporate it in the actual fee, and it's, if somebody utilizes the service, then it's a secondary fee, no different than you use Ticketmaster or whatever, where there's a convenience fee, then at least, then it's known. I think ultimately when I'm here, like ultimately when I say the people, you try to incorporate it in the fee structure, it's going to get lost in the thought of what those fees are based on, right? So that's where I'm saying if you're going to have it incorporated those costs, then it's, if somebody wants to use that service, then they have a convenience fee or whatever the terminology you want to use, so that they understand that fee is relating to something, so that that they understand what they can then choose. Then they can make a decision. Do I pay it using that, or do I walk into the town hall and pay it another way?
Kevin?
Through you, Reeve. This change in application of where the funding comes from, is it covered under the rec master plan that we haven't got yet, that we may be dealing with that when that comes through? Like, would we double dealing with this?
Vicky?
Through
Is
your
it in
worship.
line with that, I should say, is what I want to say.
Through you, your worship, that was not, that has not been released yet. We're anticipating releasing it this month, but the fee structure for recouping fees was not specifically identified. If it's something that council wishes me to add to that RFP, I will certainly do that.
That's fine, I'm good with that, that was the answer, whether it was included or not.
Okay.
Did you say it's not, so that's all I
That's
wanted to know.
okay. Anyone else? You guys really want me to read this whole thing? Here we go. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report prepared by the Director of Recreation and Communication Services dated September 8th, 2020 regarding RFP results from the supply and implementation of a recreation management software for information purposes. And further, the Council awards a contract and supply for implementation of the new recreation management software system to InnoSoft Fusion Software, London, Ontario, in the amount of $5,500 plus applicable taxes, and a 5-year agreement for annual licensing and maintenance. And further, that the staff be authorized to incorporate the fees associated with the annual license maintenancing of the recreation management software system into the 2021 recreation users fees. And further, that the staff be authorized to recoup and or pass on user fees associated with the debit card, credit card, e-transfer directly to the user of the services. And further, the council directs staff to prepare a bylaw to enter into an agreement with the InnoSoft software for the supply and implementation of a recreation management software system and a five-year annual license and maintenance agreements. I do have a mover and a seconder. We've had a conversation. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Public Works, Jamie. 7.4.1 fleet tender outcome that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the Director of Public Works dated September 8th, 2020 regarding the procurement of Public Works replacement fleet vehicles. And further that the purchase of the 1-ton truck with the landscape box be awarded to Blue Mountain Chrysler for a total of $80,946 plus applicable taxes. And further that the purchase of a 1-ton truck be awarded to Oxford Dodge for a total of $35,488 plus applicable taxes. And further that the outstanding balance of $13,717 be put into reserves and allocated towards a second half-ton to be purchased in 2021. I think that's it for that one. That's nice. Okay. Do I have a mover? Do I have a seconder?
Who's your mover?
What's that?
Who's your mover?
Oh, sorry, Kevin. Who's the seconder? Paul's the seconder. Hey, Jamie, why did you think you were going to get another truck next year to start with? Okay, questions or comments or concerns?
Do you want her to speak to it?
Would you like to speak to this, Jamie? I'm getting a little ahead of myself
If you want
here.
me to.
You go right ahead, girl.
Thank you, Reeve. So prior to my commencing my position, tenders were released, I believe in June or July, for 2 half-tons and a 1-ton truck for the Public Works Department and the Rec Department. So the 1-ton is a 4-wheel drive, single axle cabin chassis with landscape body to replace the 2003 GMC, and there will be. It is recommended that only one of the half-tons be replaced this year, the 2002 Ford F-150 in the Public Works Department. The Public Works Department uses both of these vehicles for a wide array of projects and tasks. They are older trucks and are now showing their wear and tear for maintenance issues. The Public Works Department only got one quote or one tender form back, and that was from Blue Mountain Chrysler for the 1-ton, and we did receive 2 tenders back for the half-tons. I'm suggesting that we move forward with the 1-ton and one of the half-tons, and if necessary in 2021, budget for the rec half-ton at that time. So they did come over budget, but still within the allotted amount that we had in the 2020 budget, which would be a total of $125,283, and that would be able to put back $13,717 into reserves.
Thank you, Jamie. Questions, comments, concerns for Jamie? I got a quick one, Jamie. The old vehicles, they are gone, right?
No, we're still using them.
No, but when you get the new ones, we're not gonna keep them, and then that adds to the fleet.
No, I
still-
don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing? Oh, go ahead, Anita.
Yeah, didn't we get any quotes in from local companies like around here? These are all the quotes that came in.
Yes, through the REAP. No, we did not get any local bids. Those were the only ones that came in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands going up, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Jamie's up next with the next one, 7.4.2. Request to extend airport usage agreement for the Airport Cadet Guide Program. That the Council, Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the Director of Public Works dated September 8th, 2020 regarding a request to extend the agreement between the Township of North Huron and Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada to use the space by the Air Cadet Guides Program. And further, that in pursuant of paragraph 7 of the agreement, Her Majesty be permitted to exercise her option to renew the agreement for a further 5-year period commencing June 1st, 2020 and expiring May 31st, 2025. And further, the council authorizes clerk to complete the necessary documentation to formalize the agreement for inclusion in the September 21st, 2020 regular council meeting. Do I have a mover? I have
move.
Trevor, seconder is Anita. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Jamie, the office space, I see it's $447. Is that enough for covering the janitorial work and whatnot with that, or how?
Through
Yeah.
Reeve to, Counselor Heifer. I'm sorry.
It's okay, I do it all the time.
That wasn't, to my knowledge, I don't believe that's been taken into account. Prior to, me starting here, the agreement was based on just space usage. I don't know what it would appear once, additional cleaning requirements are put in place due to COVID.
That's what it was coming at with the COVID. Everything's going up with that. That's why I was wondering.
I think we would be able to negotiate with them if that's going to be the case.
Kevin?
Through you, Reeve, is the new cleaning requirement, is that on the municipality that rents the building, or the people that are renting for their use? Are they responsible for maintaining their level of sanitation of their own building? Like, it's hard to know when they're gonna be in and out. Like, it would be hard for staff to, unless it's a schedule that we would have that prepared from. Are they responsible for that?
To your read, it would be up to the municipality to make sure that the building is clean. As far as how frequently they're gonna be using the office, I'm not sure on that, but I can find out what occurred in the past and what would have to happen in the future, because I mean, we are renting it out to them.
Cause I would agree with the other council that $400 wouldn't cover very much if someone had to be there. We're pretty youth in that building, I mean.
Did someone want to defer this motion until we have that looked into? How do we handle that?
Through your worship, so, as the motion reads right now, the necessary documentation to formalize this agreement would come back September 21st.
Yes.
So between myself and the Director of Public Works, we can communicate with the cadets and ask if that's something they're willing to entertain, as well as look into what our cleaning costs for that facility are. However, my initial impression is that the costs for cleaning for that facility are not significant compared to most of our buildings. But
Thank
we
you.
can definitely look into that.
Thank you, Kevin. Chris.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how the rental costs have changed through the different contracts? Has this been like from this last 5, and it's gonna be just the same for the next 5, or do we know anything? Or we know what this year's is. Is it the same?
Maybe Donna could answer that.
No,
So through your worship, so you're inquiring into the costs of the previous agreement?
Yeah, I'm wondering if they've been changing just from different, because our costs are going up, there's hydro involved and different things.
Right, yeah, and I don't have the previous agreement in front of me.
We're good here. We're gonna have Jamie.
To your read, to Councilor Palmer, yes, they have been changing for every year for, since it's been starting with CPI.
Okay.
So it goes up by whatever CPI that year is, so it does get added up.
Good.
Go ahead, Anita.
For termination of this contract, do we have to give any reason or not if we wanna end this within 5 years?
Through
You
your
can't
worship,
end
no.
So we can just
For
terminate.
no reason at all?
Right, the township retains the right to terminate the agreement whenever, if it's desirable for the
Yeah.
township to do so.
Yeah, no, not that we
Okay.
want to, but it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, we can. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.4.3, the Wingham Public Works Garage Facility Roof Repair. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the Director of Public Works dated September 8th, 2020 regarding the procurement of services for the replacement of the Wingham Public Works Garage Facility roof. And further, that the contract for the replacement of the Wingham Public Works Garage Facility roof be awarded to Grand Valley Roofing and Coating in the amount of $65,800 plus applicable taxes. And further, the council direct the Director of Finance to put the savings of approximately $54,200 into the reserves for future capital improvements. Do I have a mover? I have Chris. Do I have a seconder? I have Paul. Okay, let's go for questions, comments, or concerns.
Good job.
Is this?
Through you, Reeve.
Yep,
If I may just add, I was just a bit surprised at Dome's bid, being almost twice. Makes you wonder. My wheels are turning because we've used them in the past. Why would I know this is way before you? You're okay, Jamie, but originally we had a budget of 120 for this year, and lo and behold, Dome's is 121. I'm just wondering why. Was that just coincidence? I'm not sure how you estimate what the budget needs to be for different things. That's beyond me. But I just thought, that's interesting.
Jamie?
Through your Reeve, I'm not certain on what occurred during the budget process. The reason that Dome had a higher amount allocated for their bid was that they were doing a completely different type of a roof for the Public Works Department. So instead of it going back to a flat roof with a membrane, and it was gonna be a peaked roof, so it's gonna be trusses and something completely different than what's currently on the roof right now. It was a proposal, so any company could bring in what they thought would be best to put down on the building, and that was what they had suggested for theirs, and that was why there's such a difference in the money there.
Yeah, I kind of remember a bit of a discussion now. Okay.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anita.
Thank you, Bailey. So the materials they are going to do, is that a patchwork or is that a complete new roof, like a new tar and chip, or what are they going to put on right now?
To the roof, yes, it's gonna be a completely new roof. They will be removing the entirety of the old roof, just the flat roof section, and then putting in a whole new roof there.
And the roof material, is that the asphalt or is that, what is it, like, do you know?
I do know, just not the exact detail. It comes in like 6 different layers of what they're gonna be putting back onto the roof. There's a membrane, gravel, a few other items. I can get you that information.
No, that's fine, but I was just wondering why we are going to back to the this type of material while the bomb is coming with a peaked roof, because don't we get in the same issues with leakage and all that sort of stuff, and what's under the roof will be damaged, or is it damaged now because there was so much leakage?
I didn't really see I didn't see too much damage in the interior of the garage as far as due to the leaks, like as far as like mold or anything like that, because the insulation will be removed as well. And it is pretty bare bones type of a building. It's a garage with like a concrete floor, that type of facility. And the reason why I'm suggesting that we go back to the flat roof is it did provide a 20-year lifespan, and the current roof on the shop is like 30 years old. So it's actually just surpassed its useful life. Therefore, we'd be able to get 20, maybe 25 if we do a little bit more maintenance on the roof, than putting on a whole new peaked roof on the building.
So 20 years warranty with this new.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Go ahead, Trevor.
So just a comment, this again begs the question of asset management. we now have a 20-year life cycle when this roof goes on. We now know how much put CPI on it for the next 20 years. We have an idea of what it's gonna cost in 20 years to replace it. Now we can start to put this stuff away, as Donna would like to say, save penny now for millions later. But at least we will have an idea through asset management as to what these things are. I would argue this is not gonna any different than most of the facilities that we have in the municipality, where they're gone past their useful life, and we've been clawing and grabbing for every cent to make sure we keep them useful. This is the type of stuff that we gotta continue to work through with the municipality, and council needs to be involved in that discussion about what we're gonna budget for and what we're not, and how we're gonna manage that useful life over the next number of years.
And I'm in total agreement with Trevor, as you can imagine, when it comes to asset management, because you've heard it from me enough. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, I just appreciate, through you, Jamie, I appreciate the multiple quotes. It gives us a lot better picture on what we're looking at. That's all, thanks.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, Jamie. 7.5.1, the RF 2020-05 FDNH organizational chart update and proposal new compensation rates. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the fire chief dated September 8th, 2020 regarding the proposed organizational chart for North Huron's fire department. And further, the council approves the attached organizational chart dated March 2020 for North Huron's fire department. And further, council approves the attached compensation rates effective January 1st, 2021. And further, the council confirms that Chad Krager as Deputy Chief of North Huron Fire Department. And further, the clerk be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw amendments to implement the new organizational chart and the deputy reeve appointment. And further, that the council authorizes the fire chief to share this report with the municipalities of Morris, Turnberry, and Central Huron and AECW. Do I have a mover? I have Anita and I have Paul seconding. Questions, comments? Oh no, first we're gonna get Marty to speak to it.
Thank you, Reed Valley.
You're welcome.
So as you know, I reported earlier this year, or this couple months ago, Deputy Chief Matt Townsend retired back in March, and we had to, I guess, change our organization chart for that. The report outlines the benefits of the new structure. It also outlines our chain of command and reporting procedures that we have in place. So with the changes, we've included a proposed compensation chart, which would then offset the wages from the deputy chief. So the new rates to the old rates are pretty much offset from the departure of one deputy chief. We're also suggesting that we increase the responder rates just slightly, as they haven't been looked at since 2017. So both the organization chart was included in the report, as well as the compensation rates chart.
Thank you, Marty. Questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Kevin.
The first question is on you've already changed the structure before this proposal came to council. I'm just wondering why, when the old system was working, why you would remove a deputy chief from one hall and just not reinstate a new. Why change the structure when I didn't see anything wrong with the old structure myself.
Well, sorry, through. So we didn't have that level of station chief in there before.
Yeah,
So we've included that. And then, so we've eliminated a deputy chief, which makes it easier for me to, as mentioned in my report, it makes it easier for me to report, we talk back and forth all the time, instead of
you know, 3 of us. It just simplifies the procedures and less people.
My only comment is that is when you have 2 volunteer stations and that have predominantly been equal represented, and you change one to not being, I don't, just perception, or of not being represented equally between stations, it just, it was working before. The second question was on the new paid wage scale here, and on your department leadership diagram. We don't have posted here the FPO officer in any of this, but he's in the operational scale. Now, is that just because he's a shared portion? Is my first question. My second question is, do we have any scale to find out if we're getting bang for our dollar for having an FPO because of COVID, where they're not going to schools to represent, to teach children about the fire prevention, or in the past that we've had chances where we've gone to litigation with fines and we've lost in court. I'm just wondering if we're getting bang for a dollar. If we, I know we require fire prevention protocol, but is North Huron a size that we require a fire prevention officer to be on the payroll if during this time? I'm not sure what the job description is for that fire prevention officer for our municipality. It just seems that during this time right now, there really isn't much for him to do.
Marty?
Through you, Bree, he's not on that compensation chart. He's a contracted person for the municipality, and I don't know if that would have anything different. As you know, I'm not on that chart
Yeah.
either, so that's probably
but
why.
he is. No, not on this chart, but on your
Right.
your management chart.
So to answer the second part of your question, there are still numerous inquiries coming in for fire prevention and inspections that continue on. And he, like you said, mentioned earlier, he's a shared position. So it's not just North Huron that he's working with, it's Morris Turnberry and Huron East.
That was my, I just don't know the proportion of how many requests we're getting for our size of municipality versus someone else, whether, because it is shared, I just don't know. We don't have any breakdown of whether we're getting.
I think that's a totally different conversation.
But you could supply that, right? Breakdown of.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, oh, for sure.
Yes.
He supplies that in his annual report every year
Okay.
on what his, basically what his duties have been throughout the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get that supplied for you, Kevin, and actually give it to all the counselors. Go ahead, Trevor.
I was just gonna say, it should come to all of council if it's going anywhere.
Yep.
It probably wouldn't hurt as part of that activity, like as part of that report. If council so chooses and wishes to have a report more frequently, rather than quarterly or whatever, then that's a prerogative of council to request that information of staff to provide. So, you know, I think we've seen it once a year. I think the fire chief has provided it once a year on his annual report, but if council wants to see it more often, that's definitely council's prerogative to ask for that more often.
And I do see Marty shaking his head behind you. He's
Yeah,
fine with that. Maybe bring it out quarterly or something
Yeah, no
like that.
problem.
Okay. But Kevin would like to see it. We all would like to see
No,
a
I
copy of
was
it.
just curious.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, then I call a motion. All in favor? Carries. Building department, we have no reports. Childcare department, we have no reports. CAO. Oh, this is the one where I'm gonna have Trevor take the chair over, and I'm just gonna leave. Don't forget to come and get me before midnight. I'm always if I need you.
Yes, thank you. So this is 7.8.1, which is the CAO report regards to the Catherine Street lots who are owned by J.E. Hodges Lumber, and I will turn over to Dwayne. Actually, first I'll get the recommendation or the motion on the floor that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the CAO dated September 8th, 2020 regarding J.E. Hodgins Lumber, Wingham Limited, Catherine Street lots, and further that council directs staff to notify J.E. Hodgins Lumber, Wingham Limited that the road construction costs in the amount of $19,741.82 are due prior to issuance of a building permit, and effective January 1st, 2021, interest will be incurred to any outstanding amount owing, and that further that staff be directed to add interest to any amount outstanding beginning January 1st, 2021. Do I have a mover of that? I have Councillor McBurney moves, Councillor Heffer seconds. I'll turn it over to Dwayne to discuss the report.
Thanks, Deputy Reeves. So, council has received a request from J.E. Hodgins Lumber asking for reconsideration of a previous council decision, and not a decision of this council, of a previous council. In that the previous council made the decision not to waive any amount owing for road reconstruction costs associated with the Plymouth subdivision. I'll come to that in a minute. And just so council's aware that J.E. Hodgins Lumber owns 2 lots in the Plymouth subdivision. The amount that is owing dates back to 2009, so as council can appreciate, this has been a matter that is over 10 years that we've been dealing with. The lands in question are located in the Wingham ward, and they were created by the Plymouth subdivision in 1979. There was a survey attached showing where the lands are located, but Catherine Street and James Street. So 2 of the lots in that Plymouth subdivision, more specifically lots 30 and 31, are owned by the Hodgins. And basically through a series of events, and it's detailed there in the report, but those lots are separate and are allowed to be conveyable as separate individual parcels of land. And as well, in terms of, there was a road reconfiguration work that was done. There was a cul-de-sac, and a decision was made to eliminate the cul-de-sac, put the road through, and a result of that road reconfiguration, there's pieces of the cul-de-sac. Back in 2014, council had decided that the pieces of the cul-de-sac would go with the adjacent lots, subject to them being merged on title, and subject to reimbursement of the road reconstruction costs. So in 2008, as I've indicated, Catherine Street, there were portions of Catherine Street that were closed. And again, those parts to be transferred back to the abutting property owners. In terms of how the road reconstruction costs, they were proportionately shared by the abutting property owners. So each property owners around the cul-de-sac essentially were responsible for a proportional share of the road reconstruction costs. With the exception of the Hodgins, the road reconstruction costs that are associated with the other lots in that Plymouth subdivision have been paid, and they were paid back in 2009, 2010 in terms of that time frame. And at the time, the Hodgins were refusing to pay, and what we understand as staff is that they refused to pay or to sign a development agreement indicating that they were owed a refund of what they felt were extra amounts of taxes paid on those lots over a period of time. And what that has to do with is in terms of the assessment value of those lots. And in terms of the assessment value, as council's aware, is determined by MPAC. That's not something that we as a municipality have any control over. And there is a process by which property owners can appeal their assessments to MPAC. My understanding is that there was no appeal to MPAC, and
Excuse me?
There was no appeal
No appeal.
at that time to MPAC, and there's a window in which a property owner can appeal their assessment. So in 2013, there was a letter that was provided to the property owner, basically advising of the costs that would be or are required to be paid to allow for those particular 2 lots to develop. And the owner was advised of the road reconstruction costs. 72% of the road reconstruction costs have been paid. The remaining 28% is the amount owing currently by the owner of lots 30 and 31. In 2013, the township solicitor was involved and advised that the amount owing is due prior to issuance of a building permit and not in advance of transferring parts of the lot. So the transfer of the lots can occur without a building permit taking place. As I've indicated at the November 6, 2017 regular meeting, this matter was brought to council, and council received a request from the property owner to waive the amount owing. And it was also determined at that time that there were a couple bylaws that had been passed by council but actually had not been registered. And there was also a development agreement that for lots 30 and 31 that needed to be signed, authorization for signing of the development agreement to allow for the lots to be developed. So back again in 2017, council passed the motion that is contained in the report. And basically the motion at that time was to authorize staff to register 2 bylaws, to enter into a development agreement with J.E. Hodgins Lumber Limited for the development of those lots, to issue a letter advising that road reconstruction costs in the amount of $19,741.82 is due prior to issuance of a building permit. In terms of the matter, in terms of road reconstruction and everything, legal costs, just so council's aware, we haven't been incurring legal costs when this matter has come up. And thus far, since 2009-2010, we haven't been charging any interest on that amount that is owing. And as I said, in terms of the rest of the road reconstruction costs have been paid. And so, just from a staff perspective, and again, in fairness to the other property owners, it's recommended that that we notify the property owner of lots 30 and 31 that the amount owing is due by December 31st of 2020, by the end of this year. And after that, we feel it's appropriate to begin starting to charge interest, given the length of time that this matter has been before municipality and before council. So, maybe I'll just add a couple. Development of the lots for council's information, as noted in my report, will generate additional tax revenue. I think that's important for council to be aware of. And the amount owing of the $19,000, there is the ability to recover that cost through the sale and or development of those lots. So a couple other considerations for council. So I'll turn it back over to Deputy Recycler.
Any questions for the CAO? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So just to reiterate that the motion on the floor is that the Council of Township in North Huron hereby receive the report of the CAO dated September 8th regarding J.E. Hodgins Lumber Wingham Limited Catherine Street lots, and further that council directs staff to notify J.E. Hodgins Lumber that road construction costs in the amount of $19,741.82 are due prior to issuance of a building permit, and effective January 1st, 2021, interest will be incurred to any outstanding amounts owing, and further that staff be directed to add interest to any amount outstanding beginning January 1st, 2021. I just have one question. I'm assuming when we talk about interest, we're when we charging the interest at December. We're not going back to whatever. It's just as effective January 1. Okay. Clerk, we have a mover and a second, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All those in favor? Carried. Come join the party, Reed. We're on 8.1, Reed.
Thank you. 8.1, correspondence. Westerio Inc., RE Special Resolution Number 2 of the shareholders to confirm new appointment to the Board of Directors, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a letter from Westerio Inc. regarding Special Shareholders Resolution Number 2 for information. And further, the following persons are hereby confirmed as directors of the Westerio Power Inc. Corporation: Tim Lavoie, Robert Buckle, Sue Pattison, George Bridge, Chris Peabody, Mitch Tulin, Randy Hughes, Bart Cameron, and Luke Charbonneau, I believe that is. Do I have a mover? I have Paul and I have Kevin seconding. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 8.2, Wingham Ward Police Services Board OPP Detachment Commander Report from July, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby accepts the OPP Detachment Commander Report Wingham Ward for the month of July for information purposes. Do I have a mover? I have Anita. Do I have a seconder? I have Kevin. Would you like to speak to that, Trevor?
Yes, Reeve, I just wanted to let the council be aware that we did, there has been 2 appointees, provincial appointees, sworn in on the Police Services Board. Trying to remember their names. Joan Middleton, as well as Bill McGrath, Senior, they have taken their oath of office and they will have started their term. And also, I will say that there was a significant discussion as it relates to the closure of the Bristol Terrace detachment of the Huron OPP. That has been that was talked about significantly, about potential needs and wants and that type of stuff, and the municipality's perspective on that. So I gave the board an update as to relates to why that request has been asked. The municipality was looking for an ask from Aurelia, not necessarily the Huron OPP. We're not thinking it's the Huron OPP's request, but we know why they're asking, because they think it's important for their employees and their membership. But it's really a request that we don't think we should be. The municipality should not be covering those costs of having a special detachment when 2 months ago that detachment was covered by the province. So at the end of the day, there is some discussion going on. They're continually still doing some discussion on, I believe, the Reeve has mentioned that a private industry member has provided some opportunity for the Huron OPP detachment to have a space in their building. So the municipality may not have to worry about that, and the benefit of us having that detachment, or people that they have the ability to go to the washroom, interview people there and that, and it's not in a municipal building. So I just wanted to reiterate that for people here, but I would say the communication that we had, it was a very, I would say it was respectful discussion, but it was obviously warranted discussion about what they thought was important. And I would say, and I can honestly say, in the 3 years or the 2 years since for the last 2 years, I would say that was about the most honest discussion at a police services board meeting that I've seen in quite some time. So I think the provincial appointees are coming with lots of questions, which is not going to be a bad thing. And I think I've suggested that you know, any questions that they have that they wanna direct up to the municipality, that they let us know as me as the chair, and I will bring them up in this report and communicate it as such, to bring further discussion to the municipality and the information that they so need. So, is there any questions of me from the report?
Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Okay. Council reports, Reeves activity report. Well, I'm gonna touch on something I'm sure a few of you have been waiting for. The request that I sent in to the Ombudsman of Arid Burles on the complaints from a few citizens questioning my integrity on the house and dam project is in. I said I would share the findings with the public no matter how it went, and I will. So I'm just gonna read, having considered the facts of the matter. You are not disabled from participating in the voting on matters pertaining to the future of the dam, since, for the reasons set out above, your interest is the interest in common with the electors in general, and therefore the exemption of clause 4J of the MCIA applies. So, as you read, I'm deeply involved with a lot of portfolios. I can't talk to everybody about them that are going on. It's with staff, and until it's worthy of coming before a council, you may not hear about it. This is just one of the portfolios we're working on. I'm always interested in talking to people at large. You can reach out to me, but this is my job. This is why you hired me, and this is what I'll do. Council's moving forward like they never have before, and continues to work on in the best efforts for the township of North Huron. This is their job. This is what they do. This is what you hired them for. Never be afraid to ask questions, whether it's 3, 5, or 105 thoughts. This helps us towards the right answer. Let's move forward together. I want all of North Huron citizens to know that it's okay to reach out to me and my staff and my council. That's what we're here for. It's a good thing to be involved. Yeah, very good thing to be involved. I, your staff, your councillors, appreciate your interest and participation, as we're all working hard for the best outcome for North Huron. Let's work together. Let's work for a better, brighter, and more inclusive tomorrow. So I'm going to bring that one to a rest now. And again, to the public, don't be afraid to reach out. I'm always available, and so is my staff and council. And I appreciate everybody for patiently waiting while we went through this. Thank you. That's going to be it for my report. Council member report. Any councillor would like to speak about any committee they sit on or activities they've been involved in? Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Reed. Just a couple of quick comments about the Blythe Business Association. As I said, as the council representative on that, they were just wanted to reiterate their concerns again with the corner of 25 and the Highway 4, as there was another accident with a woman and 2 children involved there again. It just is their dismay of Huron County not coming up to the table and helping us solve that problem, and a reassurance of the Blythe BIA's request to for an allocation of a location for healthcare at some time that it becomes feasible for doing so in Blythe, as they feel as a businesses that the requirements or the necessity for childcare for the people that are working in the area is increasing with more people coming into town, and more businesses are hiring more people now. So I just wanted me to bring those two back to the forefront of council again.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
I can just comment, just for council's information, so township staff had a meeting today regarding Highway 4 and 25, and there will be a report coming to council shortly, we're anticipating, for council's consideration, so just as an update.
Thank you.
I'll maybe follow up that too. I had a conversation with, the problem at the county level is Central Huron was not reaching out, and as you know, 25 since the Central Huron. I had a conversation with Steve Sparling, and he sent a nice letter in of support of doing something at that corner. Today I did stop in, and Mr. Scrimmager wasn't there, that owns the variety store, But I did talk to Bill McGrath that owns the Tim Hortons, and there is concern about the amount of accidents and the effect on their businesses. And I believe they will both be sending in a letter of support shortly too. So I had to ask them because they're on the Central Huron side. And then I will obviously send that information to Jim Ginn, who is the mayor of Central Huron, so he's aware of it. It's just so close to Blythe. People just think it's Blythe, just like they think the other end of Wingham is Wingham with all the buildings up there. So I am reaching out to try to do something with that. Go ahead, Kevin.
Just to follow up, it was indicated to the BIA that those members that are on that corner that are in Central Huron, the Tim Hortons does have surveillance of that corner 24 hours, and they've made that available to Huron County if they wish to see physical evidence of what's going on there, even during when there's no crashes. You can see the near misses if they wish. So they put that forward as evidence for them.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other members? Not seeing any. Let's move on to comments by members. Any comments? We have an exciting time tonight. Anybody want to keep it going? No comments. Notice of motion, we have none. Bylaws. A bylaw to authorize the Reeve clerk to sign on behalf of the council articles of agreement between the corporation of the Township of North Huron and Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada, a representative by the Minister of Employment and Social Development for funding under the Enabling Accessibility Fund EAF grant program. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder? I have Anita. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Bylaw number 52/2020. Oh, I think I just did that one.
You're at announcements now.
Yep, I'm gonna go to announcements now. The next regular council meeting will be held Monday, September 21st, 2020 at 6 p.m. at the North Huron Council Chambers. The next Economic Development Recovery Committee meeting will be held on Monday, September 28th, 2020 at 8 a.m. at the North Huron Council Chambers. The next North Huron Police Services Board meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 20th, 2020 at 7 p.m. at the Council Chambers here. Other business, we have none. Closed session, reporting out, we have none. Confirmatory bylaw. The bylaw number 53/2020 being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by the Council of the Township of North Huron. That the bylaw 53/2020 be a bylaw, I'm reading it again. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder? I have Christopher. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Adjournment. That the Council of Township of North Huron agrees there being no further business before council. The meeting is hereby adjourned at 8:50 p.m. Do I have a mover? I have Ricky. Do I have a seconder? I have Kevin. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.